Well, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon or good morning, wherever you might be around the world. My name is Denis Chagnon, board member of iPADIS, and it is a real pleasure for me to welcome you to the first event hosted jointly by Hermes and iPADIS for the African region. The theme of our meeting today could not be timelier. The African air transport sector in the post-COVID-19 era, resilience and efficiency through leadership and cooperation. We are truly privileged to have with us such eminent speakers as the President of the ICAO Council, the Director General of ACI, and representatives of major African stakeholders, including AFCAC, AFRAA, AASA, and ACI Africa. Before we begin, I'd like to invite Professor Andreas Papatheodorou, 2021 Hermes Recommendations Committee member and professor at the University of the Aegean, Greece, to say a few words. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Greetings from Athens, Greece, and on behalf of the University of the Aegean and its Laboratory for Tourism Research and Studies, I would like to warmly welcome you to today's event, which is sponsored in terms of the Zoom link by my university. And as you probably know, Greece has traditional trade and tourism links with several African countries which host expatriate Greek communities. And the establishment of the single African air transport market back in 2018 set new challenges, but also business opportunities for the sector. Unfortunately, many of these promising developments were frozen because of COVID-19, but as the world community is gradually recovering from the pandemic, it is very important to focus once again on the importance of improved transport accessibility for tourism and economic prosperity. And I would say that leadership and collaboration in this context are of essence to build resilience in this new world. On these grounds, I will believe that we will find today's event of great interest. And once again, I would like to warmly welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andreas, for your kind words. And thank you again to the university for their support in making this meeting happen. I'd like to add that the meeting today actually is being recorded and will be available for later viewing on the websites of Hermes and iPADIS. I also take this opportunity to thank our media partner for the event today, Air Transport News. And now, it's my pleasure to invite Dr. Olumuyiwa Benard Aliu, founding president of iPADIS, to share his initial thoughts on the meeting. He will be followed by Dr. Kostas, Iatrou, Director General of Hermes. So Benard, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you so much for the kind introduction and for starting this meeting very well, Denis Chagnon. Dear friends and colleagues, iPADIS is committed to ensure that every community all over the world is aware and continues to enjoy the socioeconomic benefits of a safe, secure, efficient, and environmentally friendly aviation system. COVID-19 is the biggest single challenge ever to affect international air transport, and the African region has been severely impacted. Accordingly, iPADIS is determined to help foster partnerships among key stakeholders of the air travel and tourism sectors in Africa to navigate the current challenges, implement practical solutions, and establish long-term strategies for resilient civil aviation systems for the future. This event focuses on how to enhance resilience and efficiency in the African air transport sector in the post-COVID-19 era through effective leadership and cooperation. It follows the recent remarkably successful high-level ministerial meeting for West African states that iPADIS organized in collaboration with Nigeria, AFCAC, ECOWAS, that is the Economic Community of West African States, and with the active participation by all other regional bodies in Africa. This event also furthers the objectives of the Memorandum of Understanding concluded by iPADIS with ICAO, with AFCAC, and with Hermes, respectively. We are therefore pleased to co-organize this event with Hermes And the board of iPADIS and I appreciate collaboration with Dr. Kostas, Iatrou, Director General of Hermes, Mr. Jeff Poole, President Hermes, and Professor Andreas Papatheodorou of the University of the Aegean Greece. I'm also pleased to welcome our keynote speakers, Mr. Salvatore Sciacchitano, the President of ICAO Council, and Mr. Luis Felipe de Oliveira, the Director General of ICAO. I also wish to recognize eminent African aviation leaders here present. In particular, Mr. Tefera Mekonnen Tefera, Secretary General of AFCAC, Mr. Abdérahmane Berthe, Secretary General African Airlines Association, AFRAA, Mr. Chris Zweigenthal, Chief Executive, Airlines Association of Southern Africa, AASA, and Mr. Aliu, Secretary General, ACI Africa, who have all graciously agreed to be panelists in the executive session. I am confident that with the participation of these leaders, this event will provide useful conclusions and recommendations to enhance efficiency, resilience, cooperation, and leadership in African aviation. It will be my pleasure to provide you my concluding remarks after the meeting. Thank you very much for your participation.
And thank you very much, Benard, for your opening remarks. And Kostas, the floor is now yours. Please.
Thank you, Denis. Good morning, good afternoon. I'm pleased to welcome you to this event that is the first time that Hermes co-organized with iPADIS, an event for the Africa region. This is the third event, the Zoom event that we organized after the one we organized with Hellenic Aviation Society back in February for Europe, and then in April with Aeronautica Civil de Colombia for the Latin American market. Before, that's a week before, we have our annual general meeting of Hermes next week here in Athens. Hermes has already a long-standing close collaboration with a major organization in Africa, namely with AFCAC, with AFRAA, that is an Hermes partner, and AASA. As every region of the world, Africa has been affected with COVID-19. Therefore, resilience and efficiency throughout leadership and cooperation are key for the future of the region. That is also the theme of the recommendation of 2021 for Hermes. In our event today, we have the participation of the President of the ICAO Council, Mr. Sciacchitano, the Director General of ACI, Luis Felipe de Oliveira, who is also a board member and Vice President and Treasurer of Hermes, and Africa major stakeholders, that is AFCAC, AFRAA, AASA, and ACI Africa. I would like to thank Professor Andreas Papatheodorou, that is a 2021 Hermes Recommendation Committee member and professor at the University of the Aegean, Greece, for providing the Zoom platform, and finally ATN, Air Transport News, for being the media partner of the event. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Kostas. Thank you to both of you for setting the stage for our meeting today. I now have the privilege to welcome Mr. Salvatore Sciacchitano, President of the ICAO Council, for the first keynote address. So Mr. Sciacchitano, the floor is yours. Your microphone is muted.
Yeah.
There, thank you.
Thank you very much, Denis. Thank you very much for your introduction. And first of all, thank you very much to my friend Benard, President of iPADIS, for organizing this event with Hermes, is Director General Kostas Iatrou. Thank you very much to both. Thank you very much also to Andreas Papatheodorou for supporting this initiative. Yes, as has been said at the beginning, COVID-19 has impacted the world immensely. And unfortunately, it has impacted even more Africa. I have some figures that I want to share with you, probably you know, but just to underline how Africa has been impacted more. According to ICAO latest economic impact analysis, the global seat capacity offered by airlines in 2020 closed out 50% lower than 2019 levels. That's capacity. Number of passengers fell by 60%, or 2.7 billion worldwide. This brought the passenger traffic back to 2003 levels, and the effects here in Africa were even more severe. with the capacity reduced by 58% and the passengers number down by 68%. Freight volumes also declined as overall economic activity was reduced, but the number of all freight aircraft movements increased, and many passengers aircraft were converted to help address this increased demand. Just a few days ago, we had a meeting with certain leaders of aviation industry, and the CEO of Ethiopian Airlines informed the council that they had to convert almost overnight, I believe they said 15 aircraft from passengers to a freight configuration. That's incredible effort done by airlines in order to cope with the demand of the impact of COVID-19. Since July last year, all freight aircraft activity in Africa has surpassed 2019 levels, highlighting the critical role being played by air cargo for carry food, pharmaceuticals, medical equipment to where the world needs them most. The precipitous decline in air traffic has created a severe liquidity strain for all aviation stakeholders globally, including major operators such as airlines, airports, air navigation service providers, in addition to airspace manufacturers, other supply and the service companies throughout the air transport value chain. According to ICAO estimates, airline gross operating revenues globally have plummeted by $371 billion as a result, with the airport and the airsphere communities losing another $115 billion and $13 billion respectively. African air transport contractions are estimated to have resulted in a continent-wide $14 billion loss in airline operating revenues and 2.8 and $0.6 billion losses for AFI airports and air navigation service providers. As we continue to respond to what 2021 has presented with, it's clear that the pandemic resurge and the related shutdowns have mainly halted the air travel recovery globally. ICAO's near-term projections as early June indicated that for 2021, entirely the number of passengers globally will decline by between 43 and 49% compared to 2019. This will translate into likely losses between 286 and 322 billion in gross passenger operating revenues for airlines. For Africa, meanwhile, the total number of passengers this year is expected to be 46 to 54% lower than 2019 levels. So lower than the global recovery. Let's call it a recovery. The significant deterioration of the economic viability of aviation sector affects the balance and composition of the entire aviation ecosystem. This will likely have far-reaching repercussions across the broader economy, and is therefore an urgent priority that aviation companies take whatever measures available to bolster their financial positions and mitigate these negative impacts. It is equally important that states take appropriate initiative and coordinate actions to stabilize and support the aviation industry. And beyond simply their airlines airports, if we are to ensure that aviation can continue its pivotal role in providing a connectivity, driving national prosperity and job growth, and enable the broader economy recoveries which governments must address. Acknowledging that there is no one-size-fits-all solution to these challenges, ICAO has also developed new guidance on the economic and financial measures which can potentially help states and industry to cope with the economic fallout of the pandemic. To address the future of aviation industry, ICAO will convene a high-level conference on COVID-19 in October 2021. The conference will consider short and long-term implications engendered by the crisis, proposals for states to use in tackling safety, operational and economic challenges, and the streamlined policies in response to post-pandemic states of aviation. It will also provide an opportunity to share experiences among states and industry and strengthen and demonstrate multilateral cooperation, states' individual and collective engagements. And in this regard, I want to stress one point. This is a high-level conference called at the ministerial level. And we expect that at the level of ministers, there will be more engagement and more commitment to support aviation recovery in the interest of economic recovery and the social recovery of the world post-pandemic. It's a good sign already that G7, as mentioned in their final declaration in the recent meeting held in England, the reference to ICAO contribution to aviation recovery via CART, and the need to standardize vaccination, certificate of vaccinations. This is something that is probably the most important challenge that we'll have to face in the next months in order to help restart and to recover the traveling. The route from these unprecedented turbulent skies needs to be coined by maximum possible harmonization, efficient exchange of information, and clear common vision. I'm sincerely encouraged to see the determined efforts across the industry and across the world coming together to set and keep aviation on the path of restart and the recovery. As the president of the ICAO Council, I'm honored to say that the ICAO Council Aviation Recovery Task Force, CART, works relentless and providing member states and the industry which provides recommendations for safe, secure, and sustainable restart and recovery of the industry. In addition to its latest reporting guidance release in March 2021, it is also is now also on the course to shed more clarity on the issue of the validation of test results and vaccine certification from the perspective of aviation industry. This is what was just mentioned a few moments ago. Standardization, or we have already adopted a technical, let's say, standard for standardization of certification of vaccines. This is not yet adopted globally, and we need to have a standardization so that based on the same infrastructure of the e-passport, the same concept of e-passport, so that with the same approach when we travel and we present our e-passport, and the e-passport is accepted and recognized and read by everywhere in the world, almost everywhere in the world, we needed to have a similar system for vaccine certification, so that with the certificate issue in one country, we can travel in another country with the certification, okay, with the vaccination already done. Of course, this once that vaccination will be, let's say, more and more distributed over the world. Well, before concluding, I want to mention something else related to the conclusion of the Council of ICAO just this week. And what I wanted to mention is that amongst the several important decisions taken by the Council during the current session, the 2023 session, there's been one that is minor in the context of major decisions, but is not minor as a sign that is important for Africa. That's has been to use from the carryover from 2020 the financial resources to fund the AFCAC fund plan for activities beyond the 2021. It's not a big amount, but it's a clear sign that notwithstanding the pandemic and notwithstanding a certain number of priorities that are in front of the Council of ICAO, the No Country Left Behind initiative is still there and must be supported. And in this sense, with the contribution of AFCAC fund plan for activities beyond the 2021, we can assure that these activities will continue with the resources that are also in this way being secured. And with this, I wish to thank you again for your inviting me. It's been also an opportunity and a pleasure to see on the screen several friends that we have not had the opportunity to meet personally since more than 1 year, and hope that there will be the possibility very soon to see them again, to shake their hands, and to come back together to have social relations in a different way. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your attention.
And thank you very much, President And we all share the same hope that one day soon we will be able to meet at ICAO for meetings and elsewhere in person. And thank you as well for providing the global context for our theme of today, which is focusing, of course, on African aviation. Our second keynote address this morning or this afternoon will be delivered by Luis Felipe de Oliveira. He is Director General of ACI, of course. Now, unfortunately, he could not be with us today, but has kindly sent a video presentation of his remarks. So I'll be looking to Kostas for putting the video on the screen. There we go. Very good. Thank you, Kostas.
Hello and good morning. Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to thank Dr. Kostas Iatrou, Director General of Hermes, for inviting me to participate in today's webinar. I'm pleased to be here with the representatives from our industry and government to discuss the challenges and opportunities facing the African air transport sector post-COVID-19 pandemic, and on behalf of ACI World to provide the airport perspective. I would love to see you all in person and feel your presence and energy this year. After all, these virtual meetings are just a meager substitute of human contact. However, we need to gear ourselves with the patience and continue with the virtual meetings for just a short while longer. Over a year ago, COVID-19 pandemic seized control of our lives and transformed nearly every aspect of our world. Huge strides have been made in the last year, and we must continue to face the challenges with unwavering unity to tackle not only the current pandemic, but also other unresolved crises such as climate change. Vaccines, coupled with testing and the current health measures in place, present our best way out of this pandemic. Yet, their rollout has been turbulent in much of the world, including Africa. With some places still waiting for their first dose, the effort to beat COVID-19 is in large part now a race against the clock. There is an urgent push for inoculate as many people as possible over the next few months, including those that reside in developing nations and hard-to-reach places. Nevertheless, I think it's safe to say that we are now entering a new phase of the pandemic. There are plenty of reasons for optimism. Vaccines have increased significantly around the world in recent months. Domestic air travel in countries such as US and China is back, and in some cases has exceeded the pre-pandemic passenger traffic levels. Many countries have started easing some of the lockdowns, and in some parts of the world, failing infection statistics show that immunization is beginning to make positive effects. While the pandemic's impact on the industry has been far greater than any crisis we had previously experienced, the aviation industry has not lost sight of the top priority, ensuring highest level of safety and security for passengers and operations. Safety remains a top priority, and a safe and secure aviation system is crucial to a global recovery. Each stakeholder has a role to play in the end-to-end operation to ensure an overall high level of safety performance. Furthermore, the crisis has brought into a focus need to continue to work collaboratively as the industry in the effort to build back better and continue to prepare for what the future may hold. An excellent example of this establishment of the ICAO Council Aviation Recovery Task Force, CART, which has proved the cooperation between all parts of the industry can effectively provide a leadership and provide a future resilience where individual organizations could not. CART has been the main vehicle enabling collaboration among the governments and between the governments and the industry, which has been vital to ensure synergy and coordinated action, which is essential to restoring air connectivity and passenger confidence in air travel. CART's takeoff guidance document provides practical and consistent guidance to the industry and the governments, and has been essential to underpin globally harmonized measures that will support a safe, secure, and sustainable restart and recovery of the aviation sector. To help airports in restoring public confidence in air travel and to promote global implementation of the best practice, ACI led the way by launching the Airport Health Accreditation Program, which is supported by ICAO. The AASA program has surpassed 500 participants, which represents about 70% of our global passenger traffic. This is a significant achievement considering that our 2,000 members comprise 98.5% of the global passenger traffic. In Africa, today, we have received 74 signed contracts and 54 airports has been accredited and more are yet to come. The Airport Health Accreditation Program continues to meet the needs of our members and demonstrate the airport's commitment to deliver the objectives set for BICAR. It enables airports to demonstrate passengers, staff, regulators, and governments that they are prioritizing health and safety in a measurable manner while also ensuring harmonization between ICAO, global guidance, and industry implementation. We expect the program to continue to exist for many more years to come, and we will keep updating according to the changing climate and also to reflect the updates made to the ICAO TOG. As we gear up for a new normal, airports will continue to face challenges, some of which are local, but many that are globally felt, such as capacity and resource constraints, infrastructure development, climate change, and changing nature of the airport business, financial models, and regulatory regimes. The world airports, including those in Africa, need to consider the future of aviation and how to best build a resilient and sustainable industry. Africa is often described as a sleeping giant poised to wake. It is home to some of the fastest growing economies such as South Africa and Nigeria and markets with huge population bases. The continent has the potential to become a vital contributor in the global economy in the years to come, and aviation has a huge role to play in its development. Accordingly, with ACI's world traffic forecast, despite of the slow recovery, global passenger traffic worldwide is still expected to double over the next 20 years. Emerging and developing economies worldwide, including those in Africa, will account for more than 69% of the growth in passengers over the next 20 years. A large majority of these passengers, 68%, will be international passengers. Yet, even with the positive signs of development and growth, the continent as a whole still faces many challenges and risks, namely macroeconomic vulnerability to external shocks, broader security concerns, and political instability, as well as infrastructure and safety gaps due to the lack of resources. Considering the region's potential for growth and its possible impediment, it has become more important than ever to foster a climate of innovation. In the spirit of no country left behind, we need to consider solutions for airports, big and small, with different regulatory and operational realities, and how we can help everyone to grow. In the end, however, the emergence of more open and less fragmented African sky will be essential to support the continent's development. Liberalization and fostering competition across all sectors of aviation transport is vital to enabling access to new markets within an endowed continent. The growing commitment to a common aviation market has the potential to alleviate existing regulatory constraints, consumer choice, enhance competition across the air transport value chain, and augment connectivity on the continent. The pandemic has had an enormous impact on airports, but it has not diminished the industry commitment to sustainability with a continuing and increasing focus on climate change. It has always been the case that our permission to operate and grow at both local and global levels will only be attained when airports, the wider aviation community, and governments work together to address, minimize, and mitigate environmental impacts of aviation. ACI World takes a leadership role in the aviation industry in promoting sustainable development that removes, reduces, and mitigates the environmental impact while ensuring the delivery of the undoubted economic and social benefits for aviation. This month, we announced our long-term carbon goals for airports. ACI member airports at global level commit to reach net zero carbon emission by 2050 and urge governments to provide the necessary support in this endeavor. The goal is ambitious and aspirational and intended to be adopted by individual airports in accordance with the local conditions and with the support of the local governments. ACI will be there every step of the way to support our members in their efforts to build back better, and we will continue to adapt and improve our assistance to reflect developments in this area. And so, I will close on final thought. Today, we collectively confront the devastating social and economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The ongoing crisis has raised the expectations we have the science, and it also accentuated the fact that global challenges require global solutions and strong collaboration. Air transport has always been an industry based on interdependence of all its parts, and to ensure that aviation can continue to provide the economic and social benefits to the communities we serve. It is imperative that we work together across the industry and hand in hand with ICAO and international health organizations to ensure a coordinated recovery while providing reassurance to travelers and the staff. While the situation remains volatile and challenging, my message is keep moving forward. The distance towards the finish line will depend on our ability to stay focused and disciplined. We have every reason to have confidence that we will win this battle. However, we must remain vigilant and keep the current pace of the progress. We need to continue to get the vaccinations efficiently and equitable distribution to the public. And above all, they must continue the effort of international solidarity and collaboration, which will be essential for the safe, secure, and sustainable restart and recovery of the aviation sector. I hope to see you all soon in person, and I wish you all a good and fruitful dialogue here today. Stay well, stay healthy, and good spirits. Thank you very much.
Well, we've just had another eloquent keynote presentation, and I'd like to thank both Mr. Sciacchitano and Kostas. Please transmit our many thanks to Felipe for his excellent presentation. These two high-level perspectives of the post-COVID era and the way forward in Africa and around the world. Against this backdrop, we very much look forward to the core of our meeting today, the Leaders Panel, moderated by our good friend Jeff Poole, president of Hermes. Just a housekeeping item I'd like to introduce right now. In order to ensure the stability of the internet connection throughout the panel, throughout that segment, I would kindly ask all of the audience to turn off your microphones and turn off your cameras. This will help us achieve the broadband that we need to ensure a good visual presentation. And of course, the panelists, we ask you to keep your cameras open and at the right time, your microphone, of course, to be able to discuss and take part in the exchange. So, Jeff, with this in mind, the meeting is all yours, please.
Great. Thank you, Denis, and welcome everybody to what I'm sure will be an interesting panel session today. The topic, as you're aware, is resilience and efficiency through leadership and cooperation. Now, I believe that this is a very timely and topical subject due to the impact of COVID-19 in Africa, as we've heard from the speakers just now. We all know that air transport is a key enabler to economic and social benefits and to the livelihoods of so many people. And that is no more so than in Africa, given its size and geography and other challenges. Now, Africa is the continent of hope, and it has such an important role to play in a green and sustainable future for the world as a whole, including in aviation. But right now, Africa is devastated by COVID-19, and the solution and promise of vaccines is frankly not being realized. Across the world, almost 25% of people have now received at least one dose of the vaccination against COVID-19. But shamefully, that is only 2% in Africa. And there's no doubt that that will further delay the recovery of air transport in Africa and will dilute attention on some of the problems that we will be talking about today. But we also know that air transport will be fundamental for the distribution of vaccines in an efficient and effective way, as well as providing all of the other benefits from air transport. Now, over the past year and perhaps 18 months, we've learned, I think very vividly, that public health considerations have overridden those of air transport, despite some very strong advocacy from the air transport industry and others. And we see that many decisions that affect our industry are being taken from outside by people and organizations that we have not dealt with traditionally and therefore have little experience of working with them. And this COVID-19 crisis is undoubtedly different from what we've seen before in terms of economic downturns and indeed other perhaps natural crises. It is a global crisis which requires global solutions, as Salvatore was saying earlier, but yet we continue to see unilateral national approaches. It is a multi-sectoral crisis, and we know that aviation and tourism have been hit particularly badly. It is also multidimensional in its scope: health, travel, and economics, and so on. But we have at least now much more knowledge than we had a year ago. Although it's perhaps astonishing that if we go back a year to last June, I don't think any of us would have predicted that we would still be in this situation today. But although we have more knowledge, there continues to be more uncertainty. We know that vaccines are key, but we also know that the evolution of new variants is going to be critical as well. In terms of the air transport industry, I think we're all familiar with that expression, the need to build back better, and that will involve new business models and with sustainability very much at the forefront. The title of this session is, in my view, almost a truism, as I think I'd be surprised if any of the participants didn't agree with the concept of resilience and efficiency through leadership and cooperation. But what does that actually mean? What does it look like? Do we have a common vision that we can implement? And what do we need to do to achieve that? Well, we certainly need to restore confidence and rebuild by working together, but something has to change. It's been said that the definition of stupidity is to keep doing the same thing over and over again, but still expecting the same result. And there is a danger that that is what we will be doing unless we take new additional measures, new initiatives, and most importantly, change some existing mindsets. Now, that's not being too critical because actually we have shown considerable leadership already. And I think we can point to the ICAO CART process as a very good example of that, but much more needs to be done globally and in particular for Africa to ensure adequate implementation of all of the recommendations. And we face not only the challenge of reopening borders and rebuilding international travel, but also the recovery of what is now an incredibly fragile air transport industry, and again, particularly in Africa. Fortunately, today we have an excellent panel which will dive deeper into these issues. Now, their names have been mentioned earlier, but our panelists today are Tefera Mekonnen Tefera, the Secretary General of the African Civil Aviation Commission, AFCAC, Abdérahmane Berthe, the Secretary General of the Airline Association of Africa, AFRAA, Chris Zweigenthal, the Chief Executive of the Airlines Association of Southern Africa, and Aliu, the Secretary General of ACI Africa. So excellent representation from across the industry and the sector. The process we'll go through today is that I will ask each of the panelists to give their introductory remarks, and we will then have what I hope will be an interactive discussion. I'd like to make it clear that the panelists are free to ask each other questions, to discuss with each other, and to cross-challenge, as that will not only make my job easier, but also produce a much more interesting discussion for our audience today. Now, those of you that know me from my work in aviation know that I have a very strong focus on deliverables. So I'm looking for not just an interesting discussion today, but some clear outcomes and recommendations, and hopefully even some commitments from some organizations that are participating on this call today. So thank you for listening to my introduction. I hope that's set a few challenges, and I hope that we can have a provocative but also helpful discussion today. And with that, I would like to ask our first panelist today to give their opening remarks. So over to Tefera Mekonnen Tefera, the Secretary General of AFCAC. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Jeff. Greetings to all, and thanks to the organizers, Hermes and iPADIS, for providing the opportunity to AFCAC, which is a specialized agency of civil aviation matters on the continent. It's a pleasure to see my colleagues with whom I used to be in touch on a regular basis prior to COVID-19. And thanks to all the participants for your respective concerns and commitment to contribute to Africa during this unprecedented time of serious challenge. Dear participants, COVID-19 pandemic has introduced a new normal in the way businesses should be conducted generally, without exception to the aviation industry. AFCAC has been proactively working with its member states and stakeholders to address the challenges brought about by the outbreak of pandemic for the restart of activities, and also on the resilience of aviation on the continent. This had made AFCAC to rethink and redirect its strategic focus to align with the current reality, and also to explore policy responses towards building a more resilient and sustainable civil aviation on the continent. In this regard, the African Civil Aviation Policy, which was developed years back, is currently undergoing a review to ensure that it is brought up to date with the industry-based practices, the expectation of member states, and to comprehensively reflect the new developments and threats in the areas of safety, communication, CNS and DTM, environmental protection, in general, sustainable development of air transport. This will guarantee consistency, efficiency, and effectiveness through collaboration and cooperation with stakeholders and partners post-COVID-19 era. The sudden nature of the outbreak of COVID-19 and its devastating effects has convinced every one of us on the need to chart a new course to ensure that AFCAC is ever ready and relevant to meet the needs of the continental and global aviation. In this regard, AFCAC is currently developing a long-term strategic plan, which is the first of its type in AFCAC, in cooperation with the ICAO, Technical Cooperation Bureau. This strategic plan will define the future direction of the organization with a 10-year perspective. At the same time, from this strategic plan, a 3-year development business plan will be developed. This will be submitted in December to the plenary. I am convinced that if AFCAC is optimally organized and staffed, both operationally and administratively, with a lean structure, of course, it will come up with a result-oriented management principles. As the moderator said, he wants deliverables. Also, looking beyond the COVID-19 pandemic, AFCAC is already reviewing the existing memorandum of understanding with the strategic partners, such as African Union Commission, ICAO, AFRAA, in order to strengthen collaboration and refocus on long-term approach that can increase resilience while promoting sustainability. Memorandum of cooperation with African regional economic communities are already completed during this COVID period. I'm pleased to inform you that we have also concluded and signed MOU with iPADIS and will be working with iPADIS in cooperation with regional economic communities. As we embark on the gradual recovery process, enhancing aviation safety remains one of AFCAC key priorities to ensure sustainable development of air transport. Towards this end, AFCAC, in collaboration with the regional offices of ICAO, has identified projects and secured funding to strengthen the Civil Aviation Authority's capacity for safety and security oversight and to increase the level of compliances to the Abuja and Windhoek ministerial targets on safety and security. AFCAC has tripled the number of ICAO validated safety inspectors this year in cooperation with ICAO and RSO. The joint program we have with ICAO through the use of AFCA's technical assistance will reach out to 25 member states through the funding availed through the African Development Bank and the European Union as well. In the same manner, with the context of the African Development Bank funding, operational assistance in safety, security, environmental protection will continue. AFCAC, in collaboration with AFRAA and IATA, has already launched an assistance to African airlines and operators. This program will assist African airlines in the preparation for IOSA or AASA certification program.
Sorry to interrupt you. Could you adjust your camera, please? We can only see the top of your head at the moment.
How about now?
That's much better. Yes, excellent. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Please proceed.
Okay. This assistance to African airlines is the first of its type. This has resulted with the effective coordination and collaboration AFCAC has with AFRAA and IATA. As part of the resilient and process, AFCAC, in collaboration with ICAO, organized back-to-back workshops on the continent in order to address one of the serious issues on the continent, that is non-compliance to ICAO policies on aeronautical charges and fees, and the proliferation of fees, taxes, and charges on the air transport services. The outcome of these workshops were, and the recommendations made on the harmonization of policies in line with ICAO policies on tax and charges, and the removal of other non-tariff barriers. I'm pleased to inform you that yesterday the ministers were responsible for transport as part of the Standing Committee of the African Union have endorsed that states should be urged to comply with ICAO policies and remove other non-physical barriers in order for African airlines to do business and the cost of air transport be reduced. I think this would be sufficient, and I will be ready to respond to the questions which may come from the panelists or participants. Once again, thank you for giving us the opportunity.
Thank you very much for opening the discussion with some interesting comments there. Before I pass on to the next panelist, I have just one question for you. You mentioned that the impact of COVID-19 is convincing everybody of the need to take new measures and respond accordingly. But you also mentioned the perhaps infamous Yamoussoukro Declaration that's taken so long to come to any form of fruition. Can I ask you whether your sense is that the states in Africa are now much more willing to work together on solutions for the air transport industry in this era?
Thank you, Jeff. You have raised a very important point, which I should have elaborated. I thought that I will take it up further. Yes, the Yamoussoukro decision, particularly its implementation, seems taking longer. But what took longer was the development of regulatory instruments. It was the YD was supposed to come in full force as of 2000. However, the executing agency was only established in 2009. However, the legal instruments for the executing agency was only endorsed in 2015. On the other hand, the regulatory instruments which would have assisted on the implementation of the YD, that is competition regulations and others, were in progress until 2015. This was the history. Where are we now? Since 2015, during the 2015, and particularly in 2018, the heads of states established a single African air transport market through the full implementation of the YD. Therefore, YD has become one of the flagship projects of the African Union. A champion state, the president of Togo, was assigned to make follow-up and assist AFCAC and regional economic communities and report to the summit on a yearly basis. The establishment of this institutional framework for the executing agency has assisted AFCAC to receive financial support equivalent to 7.2 million. All the staff required for the executing agency, 3 enforcement officers have already been recruited and started working. Therefore, the executing agency is fully operationalized. On the other hand, when you look at the status of implementation of the YD, In 2015, there were only 11 states who were championing through solemn commitment. At this time, we have reached to 35 African states who signed solemn commitment for unconditional implementation of all provisions of the YD. The majority of these states, when assessed on the steps they have taken through the concrete measures, I'm pleased to inform you that 65% of them have achieved more than 60% of implementation. I'm not satisfied on that. Therefore, in coordination with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, we have developed an up-to-date key performance indicator to assess member states on each provisions of the YD and also on the regulatory instruments, to what extent states and airlines are implementing the provisions of the YD. This has been approved yesterday by the ministers. The ministers resolved that AFCAC should urgently implement the key performance indicators. I'm sure the momentum is there. Within the coming few years, we will have the critical mass on the solemn commitment of the YD from member states, and will facilitate the reduction of costs when it comes to non-compliance to ICAO policies. Though it is a bit of challenge in some sub-regions, but through the engagement of the politicians and also those who are implementing, enhancing the capacity of the economic oversight officers at the states level, will achieve what we are aspiring. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was a very helpful clarification of important background to how the industry can recover and move forward with states working in cooperation. We now move on to the airlines, and the first of our airline speakers, please, Abdérahmane Berthe of the African Airline Association. Abdérahmane, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Jeff Poole. I wish to thank iPADIS and Hermes for organizing this panel, and greetings to all participants. I'm very pleased to be part of it. Obviously, we are facing the most important crisis in the history of African aviation. While we are seeing some improvement in the numbers of infection in many regions in the world, numbers in Africa are still going up. We have seen during the last 3 weeks a surge of numbers in many countries in Eastern and Southern Africa, and this is a big concern. And as of June 2021, we have seen for Africa a drop of capacity of 49.6%, and the traffic went down 59% compared to the same months before the COVID in 2019. The traffic in 2020 was 34.7 million passengers compared to 95 million in 2019, meaning a reduction of 63.7%. Only, as was said by President Salvatore at the beginning, we have seen on cargo some good numbers, and many airlines have converted passenger aircraft to cargo operations. We have seen in March, for example, an increase of cargo demand by 24.6% compared to 2019, and also cargo revenues are represented in 2020, 36% of airlines revenue compared to 12% before the pandemic. African airlines have lost a lot of money in 2020, roughly $10 billion, and 2021 will be another difficult year. We expect to have a loss of $8.4 billion in 2021 as well. The financial support is slow to come, and we have seen 7 airlines going under administration or bankruptcy due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And only $2.7 billion were received by airlines from 15 states. And this support is going mainly to state-owned carriers. So for us, private airlines should not be left behind in this process. Safe reopening of borders is critical to recover, and harmonization, digitalizations are also key for the restart and the recovery of our operations. We also need to ensure interoperability of the different digital platforms. We have Trusted Traveler launched by African Union and ACDC, and also the IATA Travel Pass. So we need to make sure that we have interoperability between these. One of the concerns is the rollout of vaccines. In June, only 1.12% of African populations have been vaccinated. If you compare to Europe, where they are reaching 60%, and the herd immunity is 70%. So it's very worrying. And WHO has set some targets for Africa to reach 10% of vaccination in September, 40% in December, and 70% by mid-2022. This is a big challenge. However, it's very critical for the restart of aviation in Africa. We have seen also a drop in connectivity across the continent. The level of connectivity is 51% compared to the same in 2019. And so far in June 2021, only 72.7% of international routes have reopened, in fact. So there are lots to do. And you talk about the SATAM. SATAM is implementation should be considered as part of the recovery of African aviation, and also the African continental free trade area, because for me the two are complementary, and also the free movement protocol. Regarding SATAM, AFRAA is part of the Joint Prioritized Action Plan, which is going on. We had our annual meeting on March this year under the leadership of African Civil Aviation Commission, and also AFRAA with African Union and AFCAC will organize in September a capacity building on SATAM for African airlines. This is very important. Safety, of course, is on top of our priority. As was said by my brother, Tefera Mekonnen, we are embarked on a joint project with IATA, the African Civil Aviation Commission, founded by the African Development Bank to enhance the safety in African airlines. And we hope at the end of this process, we'll have more airlines getting in the registry of IASA or ICAO. For the future, we need to have strong leadership and cooperation among African airlines. We need at state level to have the industry players jointly working together. We need also at the continental level to have a leadership which can make binding decisions. This is very important. And at industry level also, we need to be organized in order to push our advocacy for a sustainable environment and a resilient air transport in Africa. Thank you, and I'll be happy to respond to any question during this panel. Thank you.
Sorry, I fell for the unmuting trick again. That's very helpful background for our discussion. What is we've talked about the damage that's been done to the airline industry and aviation generally. What is your sense on how ready the airlines are to be able to build back in line with the recovery of demand? Has the industry been damaged beyond reasonable repair in time, or do you feel that there's enough resilience in the airline industry at the moment that it will be able to grow as and when the demand requires?
You see, African airlines were in difficult situation even before the COVID-19. So COVID-19 is coming to aggravate the situation. So every airline has to adapt to the situation, to rethink their business models. I talk about the cargo business, for example. Airlines need now to consider cargo operation as essential in their operation. And also they need to rethink their fleet planning, their network planning as well. All those are very important to create resilience. But it's not only, as I said, at airlines level, it's also at decision makers level. We need to create the conditions for airlines to rebound. You see, the recovery will depend on some parameters. I talk about the rollout of vaccine. If vaccines are not coming quickly, it will make it difficult to restart the business. Also, we need also to improve the connectivity across the continent because the connectivity has been damaged. And at AFRAA, we are been working since December on this issue of connectivity. We have organized a webinar with all our members in December and the second one in April. And we have decided to put in place a routes intelligent portal, which will allow airlines to see where there are possibility to cooperate among themselves to create interline or code share agreement. This is very, very important, and we hope that the portal will be ready by end of this year.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on now to Chris Zweigenthal. Chris, if you could give us your added comments on the situation for Southern Africa.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. And I also first like to thank Hermes and iPADIS for the invitation and opportunity to join and participate in this panel. I think, as my colleagues before have said, the aviation industry is probably going through its most devastating crisis in its history. And that's globally as well as obviously in Africa. The impact of COVID-19 has led to state and government imposed restrictions and lockdown on industry and indeed the broader economy, as the health and other government leadership have battled to try and find solutions to fight this pandemic and reduce the risk of infections and protect the safety and well-being of their citizens. Aviation, in my view, has been often incorrectly blamed for the spreading of this virus. It is infected people who have done so either wittingly or unwittingly traveling while infected. So it's not to blame governments for what has happened, but we must understand that there have been, are, and will still be consequences for the decisions taken across the total socio-economic spectrum. Pre-COVID, in COVID, and post-COVID relationships between industry and government are very different. I just wanted to unpack that because I think one of the most critical solutions to finding a solution to this pandemic is in the development of this relationship. So we look at pre-COVID, we had traditional government policy and strategies developed through consultation with relevant stakeholders. And in general, it's a previous business as usual interaction that we experienced. When we went into COVID, where we're currently still sitting, in our sector, government was guided by World Health Organization and ICAO protocols and standards. And through international and continental bodies such as our colleagues from IATA, AFCAC, ACI, CANZO, and industry bodies such as my good friends from AFRAA and ourselves at AASA, states have developed their own measures to deal with the pandemic. And governments took it upon themselves to lead the process and to determine the level of state of emergency or disaster, the level of control required, and to direct stakeholders as to how they should respond and what measures need to be put in place. And these have changed based on the pandemic development. Limited consultation has taken place compared to pre-COVID. Maybe this was a time issue and government didn't want to be distracted by their mission and we wanted to act quickly. If we move to the post-COVID situation, we must learn to move from the previous two phases and develop a much more, in my view, inclusive government-industry relationship. Some of the frustrations experienced are because authorities have deemed it necessary to make decisions on levels of lockdown on their own and impose with little or no notice, causing immense disruption to the industry. I'm not saying it wasn't incorrect in terms of the decisions they made, but sometimes the way in which it was done could probably have been thought through a bit more. We all need to understand each other's respective agendas and mandates. Government to protect the nations from the spread of the virus in terms of protecting lives, and industry to be able to continue to operate viable services safely and responsibly and preserve livelihoods. Going forward, for me, it's important to understand each other's thinking, plans, and policies, and for government and industry to engage and deal with industry's daily on-the-ground challenges to make businesses work and ultimately contribute to the growth and development of their state's economy, that of Africa, and of course, globally. We have been talking about the restarting of aviation from mid-2020, when following the 2 months of really hard lockdown for most states, scheduled airline operations were able to operate limited services. However, as we know, particularly on the international side, we've had a number of false starts. We all want to get back to a point of sustained recovery, leading to effective pre-COVID operations and further growth beyond. That's how I'm very pleased to be part of this forum, which I see as an excellent opportunity to share experiences, ideas, and plans on how this can be achieved going forward. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Chris. You've raised a number of good points there. I won't ask you any particular questions at the moment because I think I think you've struck at the heart of the debate here on how do we get that industry working with the states better, and that's going to be, as I said, at the heart of the discussion in a few moments. But before we get there, let's take the views from Ali Tounsi from ACI Africa, please.
Thank you, Jeff.
Hi.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and good afternoon, depending from where you are connecting with us today. First, I would like to thank iPADIS and Hermes for organizing this meeting today to talk about restarting air transport activity in Africa and exiting this COVID crisis. So to speak about COVID, the effect of COVID-19 pandemic are unprecedented in the aviation industry, far exceeding the consequence of the Gulf War of 1990, the Asian financial crisis of 1996, the shocks of September 11, 2001, and the 2008 global financial crisis. The airport industry in Africa experienced a period of sustained passenger traffic growth until 2019. Unfortunately, all this encouraging growth has been disseminated by the worst crisis the aviation industry has ever been confronted with, recording an unprecedented loss in passenger traffic in 2020, averaging 66% drop compared to 2019 figures, and resulting in a corresponding revenue loss of $2.4 billion. Despite the slight improvement expected in 2021, the overall loss in revenue for the African airport in this year compared to 2019 will still be substantial, a loss of around $1.8 million US. That is 50% of the revenue generated in 2019. In the short term, the various statistical model carried out by ACI predict that the level of passenger traffic of 2019 will not be reached before 2023 or even 2024 in some African countries, with the degree of uncertainty depending on the evolution of the pandemic, the vaccination campaign, as well as the demographic profile of the passenger in certain markets. So, ladies and gentlemen, AC Africa has offered all its support to African airport industry since the outbreak of the pandemic in March 2020. We have published one of the first recovery guides for a safe and efficient restart of airports in Africa in mid-May 2020, designed to help African airports put in place the necessary health measures for the recovery. And I am pleased to say here that all the African airports responded positively by putting in place a battery of measures to allow for a safe restart for the operation as swiftly and as smoothly as possible. ACI also then came up with the Airport Health Accreditation Program. Felipe speaks about it before, which fully complemented the ACI Africa guidelines and the takeoff guidance document issued by the ICAO. The Airport Health Accreditation Program has been designed to assist and demonstrate to passenger regulators and government that they continue to prioritize health and safety in a measurable, established and harmonized manner. And I am pleased to inform you that to date, 64 African airports have been accredited, with Morocco having the largest number of accredited airports in Africa, with 15 airports, followed by South Africa with 9 airports accredited. Also, AC Africa mission is to represent and promote the collective interest of African airport while fostering professional excellence in airport operation and management, backed by efficient and effective program and service to achieve a safe, secure, sustainable development of the air transport industry in Africa. ACI Africa continue to serve African airports on a more sustained basis, especially in this time of crisis. So the African Airport Development Program, the new lead program of ACI Africa Management Africa, is the gateway for an African airport to confidently achieve excellence in management, operation, and capacity building through the sharing of experience and expertise on the African continent. So thus, during the lockdown period, ACI Africa has dispensed the number of online training free of charge to African airport personnel and still continue to assist and support members with various programs and services. Also, in another level, ACI Africa continue to appeal for government to support airports through different initiatives such as the protection of airport revenues, the alleviation of airport slots usage requirements, the rescheduling of concession-free fee payment to governments, the provision of relief from airport taxes, and call for financial assistance from government. So now to briefly talk about solution to restart confidence in African air transport and to restart activity in what we call it now the new normal. For me, there is 5 important issues to consider if we are to yield tangible results for our industry. First, there is a need for a constant and sustained dialogue among African governments, civil aviation authorities, tourism and travel industry players, air transport association, and other key stakeholders to implement harmonized and internationally adapted health and travel protocols to bring back the necessary confidence to a safe, simple, and seamless air travel in the new normal. Secondly, African states are encouraged to make available universal, accessible, and affordable COVID-19 testing facilities to air travelers like PCR or rapid antigen tests. Thirdly, it's important that the vaccine rollout campaign in Africa be expedited equally with the prime objective of achieving the herd immunity, or that level of vaccination which inhibit the ability of the virus to circulate in the population. Fourthly, African states must be asked to lift prohibitive travel restrictions in the form of quarantine measures to fully vaccinated and negatively tested travelers. And fifth and the last, African states must be encouraged to adopt any form of globally interoperable digital health pass or certificate approved by the World Health Organization that will seamlessly integrate into testing and travel processes for the different stakeholders of the air travel industry. So thank you, and please don't hesitate to ask me any question.
Thank you, and your 5 points there are very helpful in terms of framing the discussion here, I think. I would like to ask each of the panelists what you believe are the most critical measures that the industry can take. We've mentioned here about obviously getting vaccinations implemented rapidly is very important, but that's essentially for governments and indeed the health part of governments to perform. What is it that we can do as the air transport sector to make sure that we're ready? And my comment here is, I think we will all talk about cooperation, the need for dialogue between everybody and so on, but what does that mean, and how do we really get that moving? We're 18 months into the COVID crisis now, and we're still talking about the need for dialogue and the need to do these things. So I'd like to offer your views on what you think are the most important things that air transport can do that's within its own gift to improve going forward.
Okay, thank you. In fact, as you said, speaking is not the only thing to say. We need the tangible actions. And I think that each organization or each company should talk mainly with its government to push them to coordinate with others. In fact, it's global. It's a global problem, and the solution will be global also. I know that each country protects its population by banning the travel, and this is the easiest way for them to stop the virus coming from outside. So for me, it's the collaboration between stakeholders and the governments, and also government inside the region and internationally. And it's harmonizing procedure, health passes, protocols, and the main for me is vaccination, because it will be the solution for the future to stop the spread of the virus. There is no way, no other solution that vaccination. All the other is just to facilitate the travel, but vaccination will stop it and limit the time of this crisis. So this is the solution for me.
Okay, could we hear from the airline representatives, Abdérahmane and Chris? Chris, you mentioned that states sort of looked inwards at the beginning because they were dealing with the public health aspects, but you also mentioned that the next phase needs to be about cooperation, and presumably that means that we get a view across Africa on what the travel, on how countries should reopen borders in a consistent, harmonized way that gives confidence to travelers and indeed to the governments themselves. I'd just like to explore with you and with AFRAA what your views are on that cooperation.
Thank you, Jeff. I think it is important to know, obviously, that we represent the airlines, but we realize that this is a complete group of industry. It's an industry of subsectors of airlines, airports, air navigation services, CAAs, weather service people as well. And I think one of the biggest things that we've had to do is to understand what has happened, what the airlines themselves are actually going through. And I think that in many ways, it's also what I'm sure with Aliu, with the airports and the Kanzo team as well, is to actually understand the troubles they're going, because we're all basically going through very similar processes. We've lost passengers and flights, and therefore any basically revenue that was generated is no longer there. So I think if we understand what they're doing, the frustrations that are going through on this, and I think what the frustrations, why I focus so much on the government industry relationship is that the problem with at the moment of trying to get through and talking to government has been very difficult. And we understand that government has got major priorities across the socioeconomic sector. And they've got poverty issues to deal with, particularly in Africa. And we understand that, we recognize it. So while we're asking for relief and financial relief, we do understand that their battle is with priorities across the sector. So the important thing is to just try and get the message across to them, to try and enable us to talk a bit more closely. When measures are being considered about putting new measures in place, one needs to realize that if you put additional restrictions, it severely disrupts the industry. We've just gone through a process of, and you're all aware that South Africa is going through quite a massive third wave. But the problem has happened is so therefore, because, and particularly in the Gauteng province, which is Johannesburg, which is where I am at the moment. And the big problem has been that you put restrictions in place, and they're understandable in many cases, but we don't realize the implications of actually what happens. So you restrict travel in and out of Gauteng for leisure purposes. That's what's happened. And we understand why, because you don't want the Gautengers who are the hub of where the problem is to go out and infect the rest of the province and the rest of the country. But because OR Tambo, the main hub, sits right in the middle of Gauteng, you can't have travel to and from Gauteng. And therefore, you see that the airlines who use this as their main hub have often had to reduce capacity, some of them up to 50% from the pre-level 4 situation, because there's just no passengers. They're not allowed to fly anymore. And those often happens at very short notice. So again, it's not a question. We understand that government has taken and decided to take action. It's just a question. Sometimes you need to, I would like to see a bit more notice given, for example, a bit more consultation taking place instead of it just suddenly happening, and it's got to basically happen the next day. Forget about, it's not, you're not given a week to implement, you're given the next day. So I think from a perspective of looking at the industry working together with government, our big role has been to understand, as I said, our industry, understand our airlines, and try and get that message across through to government to understand, yes, we know what you have to do, but we also got an industry that needs to survive, and which is in a desperate financial situation from not only a profitability perspective, but a cash perspective. So I think that's maybe a first point. And then everything that Ali's mentioned about trying to assist the process of getting vaccinations and getting this infection rate down. How can we get this infection rate down? And I must say that it's not only the industry. I don't think industry's done. I really look to our public and all our citizens, my Kostas citizens all over. Guys, you've got to behave and be disciplined, because at this moment in time, that's what's caused this third wave. We just got COVID fatigue and we're sick and tired of it, but this is the result. So let's just get back to basics. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Abdérahmane?
Yes, thank you, Jeff. I may confess that the system is very complex. I have never attended so many meetings, webinars since the COVID-19 pandemic, and with very limited positive results in many areas where the expectations are very high. I think we need to improve the leadership. I think at national levels, we need to have a dialogue between the industry players and the national authorities to support the aviation sector and put in place the good condition for the development of air transport, because every country has its own realities. And at the same time, I think we need a kind of more pronounced leadership at the continental level. Because if you compare to other regions like Europe, for example, there are some binding decisions which are applied across the European Union. And we are lacking this in Africa. We have 55 countries. Each of the countries are putting in place their travel restrictions. And when it comes for PCR tests, for example, we have no harmonization in terms of the time you have to take the PCR negative test before your travel. On PCR test codes also, we really need to have a leadership, a body which can put in place binding decisions to states, and also which can push for harmonization. I was talking about the rollout of vaccines, for example. It's very low in Africa. And I know that in some countries, the rate is a bit higher. So we don't want to see some countries left behind, because it will not work. If in other countries, the rate of vaccination is low and the rate of infection is high, and it will lead to contamination of other countries across the continent. And also we need a better organization at the industry level. And that's why we have put in place the African Aviation Industry Group, which includes airlines, service providers, airports, and where we are discussing the critical issues, the challenges of the industry, and try to find together workable solutions. And it helps us to talk the same voice to the decision makers. So the good thing is that there is a dialogue. However, we need concrete results, and we need also at airlines level to really have more cooperation. I can confess that there is lack of cooperation in reality between airlines. They are mostly competing among themselves, and AFRAA is pushing the agenda for cooperation, because you can compete, however, at the same time, you can cooperate, and this will be good for passengers and good for the development of air transport in the continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to move back to Tefera here to give a view from AFCAC as well. But I'd like to pick up on your point there, that there are lots of discussion and there is quite a lot of dialogue, but we're still missing, if you like, that fundamental leadership or that catalyst to make things happen, to ensure that the policies or the best practices are adequately implemented. So I'm going to go to Tefera now, but my question to all of you is, where do you think that leadership should come from? Tefera, have you?
Thank you. I do appreciate the concerns or frustrations to some extent when it comes to what have been said by Chris and Berthe from representing the airlines. Indeed, we have been conducting or attending a lot of webinars. However, when it comes to tangible assistance, particularly financial assistance, it's really lagging behind. AFRAA mentioned that almost 7 airlines have bankrupted. The number might be higher if we consider those airlines which are not member to AFRAA, the smaller airlines. no one knows on their financial situation. It is time to give emphasis on no country left behind. Thanks to Dr. Aliu for introducing this theme. The issue of vaccine, I will not go to the statistics, but it is a concern when we look at the coverage. The challenge being faced on the supply side. On the other hand, the African governments are facing a lot of competing demand on the sustenance of the economy itself. However, what the states should consider is financial relief to airports, airlines, and other service providers. This could have assisted in the absence of direct financial assistance. The other part which I would say is the harmonization of measures. Mm-hmm. ICAO has developed the card and detailed measures. In collaboration with the stakeholders, AFRAA, ACA, Africa, and the rest, we have complemented with the card recommendations through the high-level task force. The African Union has been reaching out to financial partners, and they have circulated that this is an urgent issue to the African Development Bank, World Bank, Afri-Exim Bank, you name it. Some of the financial partners are called upon to include the aviation sector when they are providing financial assistance or postponement of their payments which were required from member states. Implementation of the measures of CART is critical in order to have a harmonized approach. Yes, on the airlines part, this is the time to look into the various forms of cooperation among airlines to reduce their costs substantially. AFRAA has been promoting and advocating a lot of initiatives, including the sharing of resources, pooling of resources among the airlines. This is the time for airlines to look into their business model, which could assist their not only to remain competitive, but which is critical to their survival. I will not have much to say on the absence of binding decisions or resolutions. This is more of political when it comes to decisions made by the African Union Commission. So there is a Abuja Treaty which established the African Union, but still not yet when it comes to enforcement of decisions made by the heads of states, because there is a provision on sovereignty, which is not the case in Europe.
If I may, isn't that where we need somebody to step up and take on that challenge? I mean, I think we'd all agree that the ICAO COP process has done a really good job, But at the end of the day, they're recommendations to states which are being implemented or not implemented in different ways in different places. And we all know that aviation's an international business, and it won't work if each state does its own thing, particularly when it comes to opening up of borders, acceptance of health passports and all those sorts of things. So, you know, if we could, do you or the other panelists have any recommendations on how we could, use my words carefully here, but almost make the ICAO CART recommendations mandatory, or give them some teeth? Or do we need an international forum of heads of states to agree that to happen? Something different needs to happen. Now, back to my opening comment, something different needs to happen, because otherwise we're just going through the same processes. We might be giving it a bit more urgency and with some more dialogue, but we're still going through fundamentally the same processes without cracking that nut of getting everybody to implement on an agreed and harmonized basis. So I throw that thought to the panel and say, how do we get there?
Jeff, may I?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, there was a joint meeting of Ministers of Health and Ministers of Transport. The resolutions they have made and then some of their discussions were attended by the Bureau of the Heads of State. We're expecting the African Union Summit in a few weeks' time, in July. And I'm optimistic that due to the nature of air transport being global, the decision would be more stronger as this time. Because when I see the number of ministers who took part in the joint meeting, it convinced me to be optimistic. On the other hand, African Union Commission is undergoing a restructuring process in order to make it more effective in the consolidation of its decisions and also on the enforcement. It is called, you may visit the AUC website on the status of the restructuring of the AUC, which is promising. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, thank you. Chris, I know you wanted to intervene.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, just to add to what Mr. Tefera said, I think you know, the ICAO CART was a fantastic project that came through, and I think aviation has been united behind its support of that. The issue really here, and I think what Mr. Tefera said, it comes back to the question of where does the leadership start? The decisions are actually not made by aviation in terms of restrictions and travel bans. The restrictions are made by the top of government, so potentially the presidents of the countries, and so we are one, if we can put it, ministry giving our feedback to government to make a decision. And they may say, yes, we understand about the CART, but the decision is more difficult than that. And we've seen what's happened in states outside of Africa, where summarily another lockdown comes in and a complete quarantine happens, and you stay in your houses. And it's not even per state; it sometimes happens within states. You know, I think of Australia, for example. It seems to happen on a state-by-state basis. So how do you actually plan this? So the leadership. I think we've got the leadership in Africa, in terms of the African Union. We've had a number of meetings, which I've joined, where there's absolute unity. If you talked about Mr. Tefera, he leads AFCAC. You've got Mr. Berthe from AFRAA, Aliu, and from ACI Africa, etc. So the leadership is there. The problem is what our word is, and we're united in what we want, but the word goes back into the various governments who make their own decisions. And so unless there is some sort of a process whereby we can convince governments that this is the right thing to do for aviation, like these protocols, ICAO protocols, which have come right the way down to all of us, they're in place, they're approved, but we don't want to implement them. We want to add these additional PCR tests, not only before that you travel, but when on arrival and 4 days later and another 8 days later. I mean, that's just over and more stuff, and there's no uniform. So I'm 100% behind. So pleased to hear what Mr. Tefera said about AU heads of state meeting, or the heads of state meeting. Somewhere along the line, we've got to get a global perspective. And I know I'm not the Secretary General of the United Nations, where I'm sure he's got the most incredible job, because to try and get uniformity amongst all states is imperative, because I think our survival is also contingent upon international aviation opening up. And Africa is not on the best friends list at the moment in terms of travel, probably also as a result of the vaccination situation. So we've got to really get that rolled up, and fully support Aliu with what he said. And so, yeah, I think the leadership is here, but it really starts right at the absolute top. I don't want to deflect a responsibility, but I think what we've tried, and that's a lot of the frustration that we've actually experienced. But we do know that we will continue to push until we try and get some sort of a breakthrough. Thanks, Jeff.
I think that's a very good analysis, Chris. It prompts the question for me, though. So, okay, we're all sitting here violently agreeing with each other, but for whatever reason, the voice isn't being heard, or isn't being heard loud enough. So who needs to be championing that? Who needs to lead that? Is that the African Union? Does more work need to be done? You know, do we really need to get an extremely positive outcome from the meeting in a few weeks' time? Where is that coming from? Does the ICAO need to be putting, use my word sensitively here, putting more pressure on the African Union and African states to implement the COP recommendations consistently? Where's that extra push need to come from?
Let
Berthe go. Sorry, yeah, carry on.
So we all agree that we have the leadership at the experts level.
Right.
We have organized a lot of meetings. I want here to congratulate AFCAC, which has been really in the forefront during this pandemic. We all know, in reality, what needs to be done. Now we lack a leadership for implementation. This, for me, should come from a political level. I will not say more about it. We really need to have this leadership. As was said by Chris also, we are seeing in some countries some border closing decisions without involving the aviation sector. This is why I think also at the national level, we need to have a representation of all the industry players, and the government needs really to dialogue with this body when they are making decisions which can affect our sector. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd never be one to defend politicians, but I think we're getting into a mode here that maybe the politicians are to blame. And in defense of that, I would say that if I'm a head of state or a significant minister, I can only take the right decision based on what I know. So my question to you is, as the air transport sector, are we getting that advocacy message across to heads of state and other important government dignitaries so that they can at least take better account of the situation of air transport?
May I respond them?
Sure.
In fact, for me, CART or health accreditation or all this program to ameliorate safety or health through the process of the passenger is tool. It's not the solution for me. You know, for example, now you can go through an airport, but maybe in a few time, if you are not vaccinated, you are not allowed to go through. Like now, what happened in Europe or in North America, in Canada, if you are not vaccinated, no way to come, or if you come, you should stay 15 days in quarantine. So either you applied the card, you applied on the health accreditation process, everything. If you are not vaccinated, you are not allowed to travel. And what happened in Africa, so in the beginning, we estimate that to the end of this year, 30% of the population will be vaccinated. But now what we know that news that then 5% of the African population is vaccinated, which is very, very low compared to the rest of the world. And my stress is in the future when most of the countries or the continent will be vaccinated and Africa will be lag behind. And here is the main leadership needs. And here is the role of the African Union and all this institution to think about Africa, because the implication of no vaccination will go everywhere in air transport, in the economy, and will keep Africa behind. So for me, all these tools, and so it's not the solution. The solution is to urge vaccination, which is for me the solution, and it's what we need, in fact, in Africa. This is from my open opinion.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm conscious of time, and I'm going to be asking you each for your final remarks right now. I think Ali, I would agree with you. I mean, vaccination is clearly the issue. We're not going to get international travel restarted until everybody's got the confidence that it's safe to do so, and as Chris was saying, so that there's no sense of spreading new variants from one place to another. But again, as we've got the ICAO CART recommendations on how international travel could be opened up on a consistent basis. And I guess the work of the air transport sector now is to make sure that air transport is itself in the best possible position to move forward and be able to recover for the not just for its own benefit, but for the economic and social benefits that it brings, particularly to an important continent like Africa. With that said, my final question to you all, and I know I've given you advance notice of this, is just a couple of minutes from each of you, please, on what are your hopes and expectations now? I mean, having had this discussion, what are your hopes and expectations in a few sentences? Tefera, do you want to go first on behalf of AFCAC? Probably not, but I'm asking you to. I think you're on mute, I think.
Hello?
Hello, yes, we can hear you now, yes.
Okay. My expectation from the participants is this is a time that we need to join hands in reaching out to the policy or decision makers on the financial support or financial relief to the industry. On the other hand, we need to promote the harmonization of measures. We need to also look into what should be done in such a crisis. How are we going to have resilience and sustenance of our respective organizations as well? Be it AFRAA, AASA, or AFCAC, we are dependent on contribution from member states or member airlines. If there's financial situation is being deteriorated, how can this organization survive? We have to look on how we do our businesses as well.
Okay.
This is how I see it. But when it comes to vaccine, it's a challenge for us in Africa due to a lot of reasons. The supply side is the most critical one. The African Union has been working with the AFRAA exim and with other global arrangements to have sufficient vaccines. I haven't heard that there was a problem on the distribution, but it's the supply which is of concern. On the other hand, if this vaccine passport is going to be introduced, it will be a discriminatory practice when it comes to Africans. In this respect, there was a ministerial meeting of transport, followed by joint ministerial meetings of health, and they have made a resolution that there shouldn't be a unilateral measure on the consideration of this vaccine passport. We have to follow the guidelines of World Health Organization and that of ICAO. We have to take into account the challenge, the coverage, and also the global approach rather than regional approach, which would be discriminatory. This is what I could say in this respect.
Okay, thank you. If we can move on to Abdérahmane, your expectations in a few sentences, please.
Thank you. By nature, aviation is a global activity and with global standards. My expectation is that Africa will keep in this standard. It's very important. And for that, I expect a safe reopening of borders with harmonization of health screening protocols across the continent, and also speeding up of the vaccine rollout across our continent. And the health situation of aviation airlines is critical. So we expect more support to the aviation sector from government and development and financial institutions as well. And COVID-19 has shown some new opportunities. The industry needs to take on these opportunities. We need to rethink our business to readapt ourselves to the new situation for more resilience and sustainability in the future, to be more in position to manage future crises like the COVID-19 pandemic. And lastly, dialogue is key. Dialogue between the industry and the decision makers. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, for your views, please.
Thank you, Jeff. I think as we all know, Africa had its challenges pre-COVID-19, and the pandemic itself has created a much more financially challenged sector, even more devastated and needed of recovery. And while the world, I think, has been approaching the pandemic very conservatively with lots of decisions, which we've spoken about during this discussion, favoring lockdown and closure of borders, Africa, I believe, should look for this unity and exploit an opportunity to grow the Africa network from a low base and developing a uniform and united response to the restart of aviation that we've spoken about. And also to ensure that we use opportunities that are created from African initiatives such as SATM and the African Continental Free Trade Area, and to those to be implemented on a fair and equitable basis. I think that my view is that both government and industry need to be a lot more expansive in their thinking and planning and work a lot more closely together. And I certainly support the dialogue question that has been raised, and to provide that much more enabling environment to capitalize on opportunities that present themselves. And I think there are many now. I certainly just want to add my voice of support for the imperative of accelerating the rollout of the vaccine situation, because although we don't want it to be a prerequisite for travel, unfortunately seems to be moving in that direction in some areas. And I agree with Mr. Tefera that would be a discriminatory process. So that's why I would also advocate further the widespread acceptance and implementation of a digital solution such as the travel pass that I know that IATA talked about. And if there are others, make sure that they're integrated so they talk to each other, so that the passenger the facilitation through airports and across the whole journey and value chain is a lot more seamless than it currently is with all the paperwork that one has to go through. Thank you. Thanks again for the opportunity.
And final word to Ali, please, in a couple of sentences, your expectations from the airport perspective.
Jeff, in fact, just to say that COVID-19 is a global challenge that requires global solutions and international solidarity and collaboration. ACI and me are supportive for any system which will allow testing and vaccination to be shared consistently, actively, and in a way that protect person and restart the activity, and hope that African population will be vaccinated without discrimination to come back to our user life. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I'm going to hand back to Denis now, but thank you for your comments. It seems on the one hand, the bad news is that vaccinations and the impact of vaccination is going to take much longer than we might wish it to. But on the other hand, that does give a little bit more time for the air transport sector to get its act together and to get this dialogue that we've been talking about underway in an effective manner. So I'm really looking forward to the comments from my good friend Dr. Bernard Aliu, who I'm sure has some views on what we've been talking about. But in the meantime, thank you to the 4 panelists for an excellent session. And Denis, I'm handing back to you now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. That was indeed an excellent session. So again, thank you to all of our participants for their very candid views, which is heartening in these types of panels. And Jeff, thank you very much for so ably generating these ideas and getting to the crux of the matter. And we need more of this useful insight when discussing some of these issues. As you pointed out, we will now hear from the president of iPADIS, Dr. Aliu, for his concluding remarks. So Benard, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Denis, and many thanks to the panelists and to the moderator. It's been a very interesting discussion. But I'm going to approach my concluding remarks a little bit differently. We've heard from the government, we've heard from the industry operators. As usual, as you know, Denis, we pride ourselves in iPADIS to also represent the views of the civil society, the users. So I'm going to take the liberty of this concluding remark to say I'm approaching the issue from that perspective. The second thing is that since this is focused on Africa, and Africa is part of a global system, there are 2 stories to the discussion we just had. The story of African aviation has been an integral part of the global aviation system, and the story of African aviation among African operators and industry operators and government. With respect to the global aviation system, I must commend ICAO for the work that ICAO has done on the CAT to enable the industry globally recover, and they need to implement those protocols. Now the work has moved to a new phase, which, because of the issues of vaccine certification and the need for harmonization, and that is something, harmonization is something that ICAO does very well. But it's reached a phase in which it is also, there is a need for a very close working relationship to continue between ICAO and the public health authorities, particularly the World Health Organization, in the implementation of any system that will be done in terms of standardizing the health protocols or issues of vaccine certification. And my request is that on behalf of African aviation travelers themselves, who may want vaccines but do not have access to vaccines for various reasons, whether due to the problems and challenges of their government or supply, international supply, that In the process going forward, there is need to have an element of no country left behind in this, so that there will be an opportunity for people to travel. Okay? In the solutions, the ICAO, the World Health Organizations have to work closely with states to ensure that there are means by which to sustain international travel from all regions of the world. That is speaking on behalf of the travelers, not on behalf of any government, but on behalf of the travelers. When it comes to the issue of African aviation, then there is the need for leadership. This was the main discussion of our last event that we had for West African states. How do you ensure connectivity at the level of intra-African air transport? In that particular case, the West African. And I can tell you from what could look like an anecdotal information, but it's something that I've observed. In the continent, there are different times the waves come in. There is some homogeneous approach or the prevalence of COVID-19 in West Africa, for example. But something very interesting, and I will tell all of you that I have noticed since I've been in Nigeria now for about 3 months. I couldn't get a flight. I couldn't get seats on the flight between Lagos and Abuja. There are more requests for airline licenses and air operator certificates. And the airlines are every day showing the new planes to go. The only thing that gladdens my heart, and I think they hearken to some of the recommendations we made, is what Abdérahmane talked about, reassessing business models. We've talked about the transition from passenger to cargo operation, but I've also noticed many importation of A2020s, Embraer 148 for domestic operation is booming. Now, that may not be very visible at the global level, but it is something that is the responsibility of AFRAA and AFCAC to assess what is going on, not only at the intercontinental aviation level, but intra-African level and domestic operation. And maybe there is some sharing of information and knowledge that can be. In terms of leadership at the continental level, well, it's very difficult to push governments. It's usually a challenge. It's very difficult to get 54 countries to implement what is adopted at the level of governments. But with the leadership in AFCAC and AFRAA, we have to continue to emphasize the need for harmonizations of protocol. And in this regard, is the issue of the single African air transport market that needs to be implemented. I've seen positive movement in West Africa, for example, in West Africa with East Africa, about movement of intra-African tourism. These are basic building foundation for air transport. So as we pay attention to the global connectivity, it is important that attention also should be paid to connectivity at the intra-African level. And in this regard, I'm very pleased with the ongoing discussion between iPADIS and AFCAC to continue that discussion for the states of East and Southern African countries at the level of COMESA. And I will be looking forward to our collaboration in that regard to take the same message to those member states. As far as this event is concerned, I want to express on behalf of iPADIS and Hermes our appreciation to all the discussants, all the participants. Please, it should not end here. After this event, please feel free to still send in your comments so that we can integrate that. And let us take a little bit from what we have discussed for further discussion at the continental level. The important thing is that there must be change, positive change. And it's not all gloomy picture. I have seen some elements. I've seen personally, not anecdotal, elements of some changes of people looking inwards to find solutions, to readapt to the situation. we need to promote such stories and in order to encourage others to do the same as Africa continues to integrate into the global network. So thank you to everyone. Thank you, Denis, for the work that you do very well, better than any other person. And thank you to Jeff for moderating an excellent panel. And again, I want to express appreciation to my friend Salvatore for taking time. It's very busy schedule to be with us today. And of course, we'll transmit the same directly or through Aliu to our friend Felipe for the very excellent keynote addresses. Thank you so much.
And thank you very much, Benard, for an insightful summary remarks that point to the way forward. So we have a lot of work to do. And actually, this particular meeting was quite exceptional, I believe, by the content and the people participating. We had more than 60 senior executives, so decision and makers and leaders. So it augurs well for the future. Thank you for having joined the discussion. Hopefully we'll see you soon in person, somewhere around the world. Until then, be well, stay safe. À la prochaine.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all for